Hey Stan, hey Danny, how
Hi.
you guys doing today?
Good.
Doing fine, doing fine. Danny's not doing so great. He's got a bit of a cold, but I'm doing fine.
Well, let's get started. Hopefully, I can do something to make Danny feel a little bit better. Maybe, I
Yeah,
don't know. Let's find out. But
good.
every time we start off the podcast, we do something called the over the top intro. This is when I sit back and I talk about you guys because we are grateful to have guests like your caliber just palling it up with me for a second. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is a bona fide certified living legend, an award winning tennis pro, humanitarian, and a global fashion icon. And right next to him is an Emmy award winning filmmaker, writer, producer, director, and the founder of Calico, a biopic on award winning culture deriving production studio. Both of them team up to bring you an extraordinary documentary called Who is Stan Smith, charting the very extraordinary life of a tennis pro, Hall of Famer, sneaker icon, humanitarian Stan Smith, making his theatrical debut in over 50 markets beginning on May 3rd. Danny Lee, Stan Smith, welcome to the podcast.
That was dope.
Thank you very much.
That was dope.
Hopefully that just brought you out of your cold. It's not every day we get a chance to talk to legends like yourselves because, and I'll be upfront with you, Stan, for a very long time, I thought you were a shoe. I, yes, I read the coffee table book. Some people think I'm a shoe, and I was one of those people. I have several pair of your shoes, but at the same time, I didn't really dig into who Stan Smith was until years ago. Till I just got curious to see, like, for starters, I read the book, and then I started digging and started realizing that you are way more than just a fashionable shoe. But with that said, with the book made and everything else, why do you feel it was important that your story be told now?
Well, the actually the book could have been most people think I'm a shoe instead of some, but I kind of thought it'd be better to do some. But the reason that Spring Hill, and LeBron James company really they liked the book and they said, we'd like to do a documentary. And I said, well, okay, if you'd like to do that. And then they hired Danny to really make it happen. And so that overall experience was a fun experience to get to know Danny and to see how he was going to treat the whole project, of including all these different things. And so it was an interesting thing. It's always awkward, I think, to have something done about your life, and kind of delving into the various aspects of what you think and what you do. And so it was kind of an introspective experience for me. And of course, Danny had to figure it out.
Well, Danny, how did you get attached to this project?
Sort of what Stan said. I think there was LeBron James's company, Spring Hill. There was an executive there. I believe it was Camille Marachi,
Yeah.
who had read the book like yourself. The title's super catchy, and it just, it's sort of an obvious thing. We all know the name. It's ubiquitous. I remember being in high school and just knowing that shoe and just knowing that that is somebody iconic, but I don't know who necessarily everything he did. So one day we had a meeting and they just said, "Hey, we're interested in you directing a documentary." I said, "About who?" They said, "Stan Smith." And I said, "Say less." Of course, that's Stan Smith. And as I did my research and I started, understanding the depths of the story and all the layers, it became abundantly clear that I had to do it. On top of it, when I initially met with Stan and his wife Margie mid meeting on the Zoom is like, "Oh, we also have like all these unexposed film reels, undeveloped film reels in my closet." And I'm like, like that's as a filmmaker, I had I felt like it was like an Indiana Jones moment. It was like an anthropological moment where I'm like, oh my God, there's all these hidden treasures. And Stan had never developed them. So he didn't even know what was on that. We just knew that they were around the late 60s and early 70s, and we knew that they likely had a lot of the gold during, some of the most exciting times during his career when he was exploding to be number one, but also, at the during a very transformative time in America, right? You're talking about 1968, where a lot of this footage was from when, the Stan and Arthur Ashe and Bob Lutz and Charlie Passerell and all these other iconic American players were on the Davis Cup, traveling the world, preaching the gospel of tennis with the State Department. So we have footage of like them playing tennis in the middle of Vietnam during the war. We have footage of them, you know, going into the 70s where Stan's playing in South Africa. I mean, so it was a dream come true, and for me it was sort of a higher calling. This is an iconic story that's once in a lifetime where this man not only was hugely accomplished as a tennis player with the sneaker, but also this incredible humanitarian. I think that's what I really wanted to, as I was peeling back the onion of the story, it became really clear that we needed to make sure that message rose to the top, which is good people do good things and make positive change. And that's
And
what Stan taught me.
I love that aspect of the film because, for lack of a better term, Stan, your life has this Forrest Gump type of moment where not only you are a tennis player at the time, but you found yourself in these iconic and places in history where there's a biopic with just those elements, not necessarily the tennis. So I just kind of want to pick up some things. Do you look back at that and was like, oh yeah, this is just surreal, or was it just Wednesday for you? Was it just kind of like another day of the week?
Well, speaking of Forrest Gump and meeting the president, I did meet with President Nixon after we won the Davis Cup in '68. The team got to have lunch there at the White House, and he didn't know much about tennis either, but he did uh, host us there and celebrating this thing. In fact, he called me after I won the U.S. Open. He was the president then as well, and so I had a little bit of a Forrest Gump experience there. Uh, but it was the time that was took place at 68, 69, 70, 71. Those were tumultuous times in the world, actually, with the Vietnam War going on and the assassination of Robert Kennedy and the fact that tennis had become open from 1968. It just overnight became open. So all the tournaments we played as amateurs became professional tournaments, and the professional game really started at that time. There was professional tennis, but only maybe 8 players or even head-to-head matches going on around the world. But it wasn't an established tour like it is today, and that was the start of it. So it was a fun time to be part of that. I was one of the leaders of the ATP, and we tried to, we established Arthur Ashe. Actually, I remember him walking around the locker room talking about the code of conduct. What code of conduct should we have? And he was looking at Nastasi, which was one of the reasons why we wanted to have a code of conduct because of behavior on the court. So, those are fun times to be involved in the establishment of a tour like that, and also playing Davis Cup. And our goal was to win the Davis Cup, to go to Australia and grab it back from them. And we had 6 matches we had to win, and we went as a team, which was fun because in tennis, it's an individual sport, and you can play on a college team. And but representing the United States on the Davis Cup team was one of the great experiences for me, and I was able to do it like 10 times, 10 different years. And so but that was the first year. That '68 was the first year. Then, and that was the year that we traveled together almost the whole time, playing against each other in tournaments, but also playing Davis Cup matches around the world.
Well, one of the thing about starting to when tennis became more open and you weren't just paid with a handshake and like you're just going over these great moments. One thing I want to ask Danny is one of the things he zeroed in this project is, and it's very hard to talk about this without actually talking or spoiling it, but at the same time, it's real life events, so it's very hard. But one of the things I want to ask Danny is, why was it so important to highlight the friendship between Stan and Arthur Ashe?
It was incredibly important because I think it was so formative for Stan, right? It's like Stan sort of says it in the film where he grew up a bit insulated, in a waspy neighborhood, and so that literally that summer, when '68 when he went on the Davis Cup tour, set against the backdrop of the civil rights movement and MLK's assassination. Um, Getting close to Arthur, I think, opened up his world. And in a lot of ways, it laid the foundation and the track for what was to come, which is this egalitarian mindset of making sure everyone gets a fair shake. So Arthur played a pivotal role in Stan's own transformation. So, and then there's also such a beautiful friendship that, I don't think was never quite explored, right? Like, and even the way when I was talking to Stan about his whole life and doing the research process, um, it wasn't, I never knew how close they were. And obviously Arthur was a change maker. And so, it was very important. And they were such close friends. And I think that would continue all the way up until Arthur's death. Um, and one of my favorite parts of the film is when Stan gets very honest and he gets obviously choked up about it. You can tell that um, Arthur did have such a profound impact on him as a human, and that Stan acknowledges that he wish he could have done more. But of course, you're going to say that in retrospect, everyone wants to do more. But the fact that Stan was shoulder to shoulder with Arthur during really challenging times when it was, you could technically, I don't, the word cancel didn't exist back then, but you could get canceled for being too vocal about things. Um, so I applaud Stan, and I thought that was a really important part of the film that I think was, I had a responsibility to tell because Stan was and still is, of course, an ally to the Black community, and people probably never would have seen that by just looking at that shoot.
Well, there's a lot with that. Stan, one of the reoccurring themes of this project is there's a list of goals, and it centers this movie about what you wanted to do, what you want to accomplish as the film rolls on. Now, do you still use that list of accomplishments, or is it still on you? I mean, because you're still spry, you're still out here, there's still more things for
Yeah.
you to do.
Yeah, well, they had the four goals, and then the fifth one was a dot dot dot. And so I've been thinking about the dot dot dot, since we did the film, and that wasn't one of my original goals was the dot dot dot, but it certainly has been my life of what I've done since I stopped playing tennis, and uh, it's it's been the opportunity, I guess, to do other things that are impactful in the world and to maybe help some people along the way. And Arthur did provide a great example. He was 4 years older than I was. He graduated from UCLA, which is one of the bad decisions he made in his life. But I went to USC, so it wasn't, it didn't really work too well that way. But we always had some bets, on the football and basketball games, and but we also, you know, played each other in some big moments, and then we also, worked together as a team, playing Davis Cup, and that was for the '68 and '69. That was the most important thing for us to do. Now, meanwhile, Arthur won the U.S. Open, and then we won the doubles that year as well in '68 at the U.S. Open. So, uh, you know, it was great to celebrate that with him. He was playing lights out tennis at that time. He was beating everybody in our Davis Cup matches, and of course winning the U.S. Open. And then, his father was a policeman, and he taught him to respect people. And I think that impacted me as well, to respect people no matter who they are. And that's kind of stuck with me ever. That's been the dot, 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 I think.
Okay, okay. Now, one thing I do have to ask both of you, I guess, because Stan, it was brought to my attention that you were very instrumental about this. Obviously, it's your life story. So it's only 90 minutes, or give or take. It's about 90 minutes. What was left on the cutting room floor? Both of you. I'm very curious. What was something that you would have put in this film that it just, for whatever reason, it's just not in there?
Yeah, I mean, I to just put it back in context, we made the film during the pandemic, and it was, it almost seems like a distant past, but where you're getting tested every 24, 48 hours, which is annoying as hell, by the way. Um, with the threat of like someone getting sick and falling out of the crew and shutting down production. And part of that was, I really wanted to show Stan's work with the Boys and Girls Club. He works very deeply with the Boys and Girls Club in South Carolina. Um, and we couldn't because they weren't having any in-person anything. It was just monthly Zooms. So I would have loved to have captured that because that, for me, is a capstone to all his humanitarian work. It would have been a nice manifestation of the tangible work he's doing to help, society. So I wish we could have shot that, but the timing didn't work out. A scene that I loved was we called it Battle. It was called the Battle of Bucharest, where you notice that we cover a lot of world history, and I love the Forrest Gump reference. It's funny you say that because of course, not like the character stands way cooler than Forrest Gump. Um, but it's funny in my initial pitch, because when a filmmaker is up for a project like this, you have to come with a take on it, right? And my take literally was he's kind of like the Forrest Gump of tennis. He sort of unexpectedly stumbled into all these big world events. So it's funny you mentioned that. But one of those events were at the height of the Cold War. You got Stan and his partner at the time. Bob Lutz was his doubles partner, but Eric Van Dillen played with him against Nastasi and Tiriac, these villainous looking players in Romania, Bucharest, Romania, at the height of the Cold War. So imagine, these two Americans marching into this Roman-like Colosseum with Romanians jeering and talking smack and throwing things on the court. And it's such a fun moment because, again, I think it was important to take all of these matches and all of these moments in his story, but couch them in a larger context, whether it's thematic, whether it's historical. It can't just be he won the US Open and that's that. No, he won the US Open at the height of, at the height of all this turmoil in America when Arthur also wins he was the first black tennis player to win the US Open. So it was important to really couch everything that happened in his life with something bigger, with something more meaningful. So that was another scene that I wish we could have included, but you can't include it all. You got to kill some darlings, and
Oh,
they're
I
definitely.
see. I see. But
We could have
this,
interviewed some linesmen in Bucharest. They're all related to Tiriac. I think they're Tiriac's cousins and nephews, and so we had to deal with them. They seem to be somewhat biased during that match.
well, I tell you something that's not biased. This film is great. I thank you guys so much for giving me a little bit of your time. I can't wait to put on my Stan Smiths to go check it out in the theaters. Actually, I'm
Right.
bringing one of my buddies, Dave Brown, who's a bit of a Adidas enthusiast. He's more of the the shell toe type of dude. He one of those guys. Maybe we
Okay.
could convince him to get some Stan Smiths before the premiere.
Well, I tried to get DMZ, Daryl, to try to wear my shoe, and he loved those superstars too. So he wrote a song about it, which was before he was even paid. It was great.
So we'll see. We'll try to check him. Maybe we'll get into it so we can get him there. But thank you guys so much for your time. It's a hell of a film, and I wish you guys nothing but success. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your time.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Sam.
Have a great
Thanks
one.
so much, man. That
All
was
right.
great.